Actually, to bring it back to one of the things that I've learned from my prior places of work, I talked a lot about how culture is really important. But to double click into that a little bit more, of all things, I actually really believe empathy is super important. Like, if you're working on this really tough, complex project with a multidisciplinary problem, then you need a multidisciplinary team. And the foundation of that multidisciplinary team really actually comes from empathy. You've mentioned how, in doing this, you really started to appreciate some of the complexities of biology. And that's just as important for everyone else that, may not be a biologist that has decided to enter the life sciences. When you've got engineers and scientists working together, everyone just has to walk a mile in each other's shoes a little bit. And that means biologists understanding the process for building things within the framework of engineering constraints. That also means engineers understanding and maybe really appreciating the massive complexities of biology and the many unknowns that come with it. But that's step zero, because once you have that empathy, and when you can get it working really well, it kind of feels like magic. There is one example that I really love to talk about, where every once in a while we'll run a screen, and we run it in a cycle that's really, really fast. So our scientists will plan these pretty large discovery screens from their desks in the office, and then they'll walk about 50 feet that way into the lab. They'll tell the robots to execute it, and then data starts streaming out of the lab. And what's really cool is sometimes we'll work in a close iterative enough cycle that we can start looking at the data as it's coming out of our lab and starting to analyze it and get insights from it before the screen is even fully done being read out. And then as this screen is currently going through the rails and being run, we can start designing the follow-up screen with some of those insights. And that creates these really fast iterative cycles that, again, almost feels like magic. So that's why I believe culture is so important. For that to happen, you need to create the environment where you can encourage that kind of serendipity for those little magical moments to happen. And that really starts with empathy, just getting everyone to understand everyone's disciplines just a little bit more and having a little bit of shared context.
Is there a practical way, for folks who are listening to this and want to, create that culture of empathy within their organizations? I guess what advice would you have for them to be able to take a first step there and have those different colleagues be able to understand each other's worlds a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess roughly there's two categories. There's structured and then unstructured. I am also a fan of some of the structured processes you can have. How do you get everyone to understand each other's disciplines? You can have things like lunch and learns, seminars. We have regular all-hands meetings at our companies, and we'll always have someone on a rotating basis talk about what they're doing to the rest of the company, which is super helpful. You imagine if you're a cancer biologist, you've been working deep into this one program, and you're now hearing a software engineer talk about how they optimize the rendering of this one front-end component. It's like, whoa, this is a different world, but that's kind of cool. So that's like an example of a good structured process that you can create to encourage that. But I'm also a huge fan of unstructured processes. And that really means, we're here in Redwood City in our space, and most people basically come here on site almost every day. And you just can't beat really just being there next to each other. I've talked a bit on sort of how to build proper engineering systems for scientists. And part of that also means being right there, not just in the same office, but if you want to learn more about science, get in there, get into the lab, put on a lab coat, stand right next to them, say, hey, what you're doing is really cool. I just want to learn. Can I watch? Can you explain some of the stuff you're doing? In fact, if you ask nicely enough, maybe you can help them out, and you can even see what it feels like to be in their shoes. And that applies the other way as well, from any discipline to any discipline. But really just being there next to them and seeing how it feels is another good way to bring up that empathy.